What's up, everybody? Welcome to the fourth installment, number 4, the number of Keon Coleman, the number of Kevin Cobb, the number of, can't really think of any number 4s right now, but big week. We just saw some good games, some good and not so good bets. Overall, really good game. Really good slate of games, I should say. And we're going to just go into the Ballin Fallins after this past weekend's performances, and then just go recap and review what we saw. So, all right. I got to go with my Fallins of this week. I'll just rattle through those first. Don't want to dwell too much on them. I think those fan bases and teams have kind of suffered enough. I don't like to pile on to people, while they're down, but look, I think a common theme is we're going out west. And I think first it sort of begins and ends with, I think, USC. And I think Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams as obviously the staples of that program the past couple seasons. And when you think of it's interesting because, I think of almost like with college basketball around the corner. I like to think of almost being a bit of a Nova fan here. It's like the Nova teams of old, it's like you live and die by the three was a common theme. And it's like with, USC, you kind of live and die by Caleb Williams and some deep intermediate passing attack, which they just had none of. Really just let me down. One of my best bets. And that was just not fun to watch as somebody who had USC.
Yeah. I did not, not to I called it. I did say I had Notre Dame in this game, and the reasoning was I think a lot of people kind of saw this coming when you watched what USC's been this year, and really what Lincoln Riley coach teams have been for a while, where it's this electric offense, but it's maybe a little soft inside, and then just nothing to stop the other team on defense. And we talked about how Notre Dame's offense hasn't been electric, but a lot of offenses can look pretty good against that defense. So you need exactly what you said. You need Caleb Williams to be throwing the ball all over the field, look like a Heisman, which he usually does. But
not at all.
A few picks in that game and really swung things.
Yep. And honestly, to give some credit where I feel like it's relatively due, we talk about really bad defenses, LSU, in that similar boat. But with USC, I don't think they necessarily were atrocious or they're put in their worst performance of the year. It was just they were put in so many bad spots with key turnovers, and they were defending, they were on the field so much and put in some really bad spots, to defend in really plus territory. And just, you can't put any defense, let alone a defense like that, in those continually bad positions, which Caleb Williams and, Lincoln Riley at the helm of that offense inexcusably didn't really have seemingly any answers for that Notre Dame defense. And I guess struggled really with, finding guys or maybe got to review the tape, but just that man defense just created so many problems. And I think it kind of puts USC really derailing their season, although it's not a conference game. So there is still that decent shot that they can maybe run the table in theory, but I don't think that's really going to happen. I think we saw from another game that we'll now soon transition to that they're not.
Yeah, I just have one more point is if I were USC, I would be worried about this being a blueprint game too, because Marcus Freeman has obviously had a lot of success as a DC before he got the head coaching job.
Yeah.
He's a really smart guy. And the way they played that defense you mentioned, man coverage, dropping linebackers into coverage, and really kind of confusing. I don't want to say confusing Caleb Williams, but he threw a couple of those picks to spots where a lot of college defenses don't have a guy, and Notre Dame did.
Yep. Just forced him to really kind of play hero ball, which we saw that even glimpses of against Colorado, where he threw his first pick of the year, and then 3 picks this past game, just uncharacteristic. But you got to hope if you're an SC fan that they kind of turn a page.
Yeah.
With these games upcoming. But enough said about that game. My other Fallin from out west, I think it's got to be the Colorado Buffs who played on Friday night.
Buddy.
My Buffs.
Tough weekend for your teams, huh?
Yeah, my teams, man. It was Colorado, Washington State, South Carolina, just atrocious. But out west with Colorado at home, you were up 29-0 against a pretty much safe to say bottom, with all due respect, more of an academic school there, but a bottom. No, Andrew Luck's not walking through that door. A bottom of the barrel of the Pac-12 in terms of the hierarchy, which it's no slouch. I mean, you're the bottom of the best division, but just, or conference, I should say, unacceptable from Colorado. I was reviewing too just some statistics from I guess team defense. I mean, Colorado is one of the worst passing defenses, and obviously that game kind of showed why. I mean, how you can allow a 29-point comeback in the second half, it's just inexcusable. And Colorado, with as good as Shedeur Sanders is and Travis Hunter, although Travis Hunter really struggled against somebody we'll touch on later, but with that, it just shows, I think, at almost any level, if you don't have a good defense, if you don't have a good offensive line, they just could not do anything to try to close that game out in the second half, and it was brutal to watch as somebody who had their over for the season win total, which now we have to really scratch and claw for the remaining 5 games.
Yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of times the difference between like good teams and great teams, or mediocre and good teams, is when you have a lead late in the game, can you run the ball, impose your will, and just run out that clock and just win the game without having to play any defense. And Colorado's offensive line, as you touched on, is porous at best. And and so when you can't do that and you have to try to throw the ball, if you're not getting first downs, you're not moving the chains, now you got to play defense. And sometimes things like that happen.
Oh yeah, they do. And it's just been, I mean, with Colorado, I mean, just looking back, really glad to have won some of the early games, beating Colorado State in a couple overtimes. I mean, just it's gonna be a, I think, stress riddled week to week basis now for me, trying to sweat out a couple more wins against still some pretty good teams.
Yeah, I don't like your odds. I think
it's not ideal. I mean, look, they've already gotten USC, which, looking back, could have been a win they should have had, but or one of the more relative opportunities they could have had. But they got USC, they got Oregon out of the way, but still some matchups that I don't know. Arizona's now looking especially tough, so I don't know.
Yeah, my win total over looking pretty nice.
Yeah. What do you just need one now?
Just need one.
Just need one. Okay. Well, you can have it against anybody but the Bucs.
Colorado.
Except Colorado. Yeah, you'll be good. But yeah, wrapping up my Fallins, I got to go back east now to a game that we actually kind of previewed pretty well, I think, with Louisville going to Pitt. A pretty classic trap game. Yep. Pitt just made some plays, kind of there. We talked about, I think you talked specifically about teams just kind of trying to be up for it as kind of like almost their statement games in an otherwise really kind of struggling, middling season. Yeah. And Pitt showed up and beat a top 15 ranked Louisville, who came off of obviously really good performances. But Louisville, for that, I mean, I just got to, against I know you're away, but you were, at the end of the day, you were a 10-point favorite, I believe. So, it's just poor.
Yeah. I don't know what the line opened at there. I know it closed at 7.5.
That's right. No, it was 7.5. Okay, I was confusing them with,
But, yeah, it was one of those things. Pitt didn't just have the pop of coming out as, like, this is our ranked matchup, we're going to, and then fade. They were on it all game. That energy was high, and Louisville's, I think, was down, and, like, that's what happens in a letdown spot. We talked about it, because coming off the biggest win in, probably since 2014 for that program, definitely the biggest win any of those players have ever had at Louisville. And, there's going to be a little bit of a natural come down from that. And you're still playing another ACC team, it's...
Yep. So that recaps kind of the Fallins of the week. Now let's turn a positive note here. Let's get into some Ballins here. And when I think of Ballins, I mean, I just kind of mentioned them a little bit ago, but Arizona 44-6 kind of rout of Washington State, which we have believed in Washington State, and some tough performances the last couple of weeks. I mean, they could easily been, the case for Fallin as well, but with Arizona, I mean, Jed Fish, Noah Fafita, I mean, they're really starting to kind of turn things on.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about last week, could Jaden DeLauro lose this job? And now the question is flipped totally. Could he get it back ever?
Noah
Fafita took this thing by the reins and looks like, one of the best quarterbacks in the conference that has all of the great quarterbacks.
Yeah, and if you're an Arizona fan, I mean, he's a freshman. He's got several. I mean, he's just scratching the surface, which is crazy.
He's going to be so good at Alabama next year.
Could very well happen. That's a good call. But I mean, enough said. Just an unbelievable performance from Arizona, and then sticking out west. That's the theme of this, I guess, this week's show. But I got to give Washington some credit in what was my predicted game of the year. Almost was even better, with potentially going to overtime if Oregon had made that kick, and that would have been incredible to see in overtime, back and forth. I mean, it's just, I could easily have seen that being like a 4 or 5 overtime, because who's stopping those offenses?
Once they go to the 2-point conversions too, those two quarterbacks just need a couple yards.
Yeah, I mean, get creative. I mean,
could have gone all night.
Yeah, and that would have been like the I mentioned already some college basketball analogies. That could have been the OG Syracuse UConn game where it was Hashim Thabit and going into, I think it was like 5 hours, going into like 3 a.m. and that was just a unbelievable. I mean, that's a crazy historical game there. But I got it. Yeah, Washington credit there. That was our gut off game, which you leaned Oregon, I leaned Washington. I'm now 2-0 in gut offs for the record here. But I got to give Penix and that Washington team some credit.
And I will say, we talked about how back and forth we were on that game right before kickoff. I hadn't bet it. I wasn't going to bet it. I just got a hair, just Washington in the over, just a little parlay.
Yeah.
And it was really fun watching that game, watching all those points and watching that Washington offense, having that bet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just weapons all over the field, both teams. I mean, incredible receivers with Roma Dunze and Troy Franklin. And it's funny, I mean, they mentioned on the broadcast that with Roma Dunze, I mean, and you see on TikTok, you see on the social media sphere nowadays, that little era, this trend of, how often do you think of the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Well, Roma Dunze's dad actually named him
after the Roman Empire?
Just Rome, because how much he liked the Roman Empire, which is pretty crazy. In this, it's just, he is kind of the let's see, really the prodigy of college football right now, and the darling of the TikTok.
Yeah.
So
I'll save a little bit of thoughts on that game because I know we'll break it down in full length.
Just later, wanted to, and that's why I didn't want to, kind of just blow everything here on Ballin and Fallin, but just had to mention them for a big marquee win. And then, last but certainly not least, the Ballin of the week.
All right, the Ballin of the week.
The Ballin of Week 7. I got to go with Stanford receiver Alec Manor, 13 catches for 294 yards, 3 tutties. I mean, against Travis Hunter, who's no slouch, too. Just unconscionable. Just Daniels, the Stanford quarterback, just throwing it up. And, A.O. Manor is going to get it somehow. And he did time and time again. Just an unreal second half. I mean, obviously that whole Stanford team is second half performance, really, but just unbelievable.
I mean, it was quite literally one of the best single game performances I've ever seen watching football.
Easily. And I think it made it a very easy choice then for the Ballin of the Week here. It's going to be hard to top for when we look back on the season who had a single at any position a better performance.
Is that going to be the Ballin of the Week of the year?
Yeah. The BOTW OY 2023. Very early candidate.
Prestigious award.
Very early candidate, yeah. But that recaps our first segment here. Now let's just go into recapping this slate of games.
Yeah. I think we opened last week talking about the 3 big teams playing at noon.
Big
none
lines.
of them were going to be close games, and we crushed it, Kyle. Wasn't
Pretty
a
much.
crazy prediction, but yeah, it was an kind of slow start to the afternoon. If you were watching, there was nothing too close.
It was kind of well, it was kind of like a slow and sluggish in a way because it was kind of the first quarter, first quarter sluggishness. I mean, you saw Georgia Vandy tied after the first. Indiana actually made a call. I was really kind of spot on with saying if there's one team out of the three, Purdue, Indiana, and Vandy that I kind of see maybe making some noise, it was Indiana, and they jumped off to a 7-0 lead after through the first quarter. But then I was like, yeah, as I said, I think it's just Michigan just going to kind of guns blazing, which they did.
Yeah.
I mean, 45-point victory. Each of those teams, I guess, Ohio State, Michigan, the Big Ten teams covered. Vandy did, I guess, cover at home. Still 17-point victory by Georgia.
And it wasn't a 17-point game if you watched it. Vandy scored, most of their points late in that game.
13 in the fourth.
Yeah, when it was over. And, it was just all three of those games, if you were flipping back and forth like I was, you just saw it looked like it was just total class matchups. Those three teams outclassed their opponents.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just really interesting, though, to watch what happens now as we go into the back end of the schedule with Brock Bowers, though, needing ankle surgery. So that'll be a big time story to follow. And already Georgia, of course, couldn't come at a worse time for them as they get into some top 25 SEC East play. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we talked about, I said as much on our first show, Georgia hasn't really come out guns blazing, and then as soon as they kind of round into some form here, you lose your best player. Going to be really interesting to see how that shakes up over the next couple of weeks. But maybe potential upset alerts. We'll see. Depending on if you don't have Brock Bowers, it's going to be a lot to ask out of the Carson Becks and the rest of those guys on the offense. Which maybe it's just going to be the defense taking over game after game after game, which they've obviously shown they're capable of in previous years and some games this season. But really interesting storyline to watch here as we go through the coming weeks and just kind of going through those. So getting through those first three, some ACC, some more really lopsided games. Quite frankly, we got Florida State taking care of Syracuse. Keon Coleman making some highlight reel catches. I mean, he's, I think, heading along with a handful of really good receivers in this 2024 upcoming draft. And obviously good prospects, but good producers right now on a week-to-week basis at the college level. That Florida State offense churning, only allowing 3 points to we talked about, Garrett Schrader, LaQuint Allen, not a total joke of an offense by any stretch. So respectable performance by FSU.
No, I think the thing that sticks out from that game is Florida State's defense because, like you mentioned, Syracuse doesn't have a dead dog offense, and they looked like it against Florida State. They couldn't move the ball. They couldn't do anything.
Nope.
And that's what Florida State's going to need if they're going to be a real contender. They're going to need to have their defense step up because they're another team. They've got all the weapons on offense. Your question would be the defense. So I thought if you're a Florida State fan, that was a good sign for you.
Oh, for sure. And then just quickly going through a game we went through as quickly in our preview. You talked about maybe not even feeling comfortable to really bet it because of the potential for UMass to maybe show up, but they did not against Penn State, 63-0.
Yeah. And, I told you when I put Penn State number 3 in my best teams in the country, all this team does is score. This isn't your typical Big Ten, Penn State, gritty linebackers and fullbacks team. This team scores a lot of points. Obviously, it's UMass. It's nothing to write home about beating them. But 63 points is 63 points, and we'll see this weekend. We'll have a lot more to talk about this upcoming weekend.
Oh, yes, we will. Yes, we will. But no, yeah. And speaking of which, obviously it's a Ohio State Penn State matchup. We'll get in depth, further down the line in our upcoming show on Friday. But really interesting. I guess I kind of glossed over Kyle McCord rounding into some form. It's going to be really interesting against although you just mentioned maybe you don't not the traditional Penn State team, but they still got guys on that defense
Oh yeah,
all
I
over
mean
the
it wasn't
place.
63-20. It was
No,
63-0.
yeah,
You know, yeah,
exactly. Maybe UMass doesn't have the best guys on offense, but still, I mean, there are some from an NFL draft just prospect. I mean, elite performers who can do it all. Really good, you know, profiles. There are going to be. I can't imagine. I mean, I got to imagine every single NFL team's going to have guys at that Penn State
oh
Ohio State game, full representation throughout the league. If I had to guess for
yeah.
sure, but all right,
Did you see the
moving
report, by the way, that 34 NFL teams had scouts at Oregon, Washington?
34.
I
Yeah,
forget
I
who
heard
reported
some.
that one, but
Yeah,
the two teams that aren't in the league were even there. That's how big it was.
I think we heard some potential USFL, potential XFL, potential Canadian League too, just in case guys don't get drafted. They were really trying to put all the stops
Yeah.
out for that. But yeah, speaking of which, just going down the top 10. I mean, look, that Oregon Washington game, unbelievable. Really, Michael Penix and Bo Nix, I think, were as advertised, and just an incredible game to watch.
Yeah, we'll get back to it. Or we'll get into it now. We are getting back to it.
Yeah,
We talked a little bit about it.
a little bit.
But my biggest question coming out of this game is, if you're an Oregon fan, how much are you waking up questioning Dan Lanning this morning? I mean, he left a lot of points on the board, not taking field goals.
Oh, he did. Yep.
Yeah, and getting stuffed, not converting when he passed up on the opportunities for field goals. It makes you wonder, because obviously 3-point game, you leave 6 points on the board.
It's I see. I totally see where you're coming from, but I mean, all in all, I mean, I liked, and I think you can easily justify the decisions he made there. I mean, it's kind of like a Monday morning quarterback, I guess,
Mhm.
perspective. But I mean, look, you had to be aggressive. That was the team where you had to be aggressive against a Washington team
Mhm.
there in Seattle. I think maybe the most questionable decision, I think, arguably, is when he went for it on the end of the game, but and then not getting it. But then again, if you just punt it away and pin that Washington offense inside their own 15-yard line, 10-yard line, well, who's to say that they don't just go down the field more methodically and basically give you no time to then try to go back down and get a field goal answer?
Yeah.
So,
I did like, he came out and he went for two early when, there was
yep,
no mathematical reason to do so. But
just shootout per, yeah.
oh yeah, no, I like the idea of saying, hey, this is a great team we're playing. To get an edge, we're going to be aggressive. As the game wore on, though, it felt more and more like every decision that could be made was on the basis of what's the aggressive move? How can I be more aggressive? And sometimes taking the points is not always bad.
Yeah, yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, they had a chance to just
Yep.
force overtime, which I think they would have been obviously I think it would have been anybody's game, almost a coin flip once you get to
Oh
that
yeah.
point.
Well, like I said, I bet Washington in that game, and I was still hoping that field goal went in
Yeah,
because who didn't
just
want to
to
see
see.
overtime in that
No,
one?
yeah, of course, for sure, 100%. But yeah, unbelievable game. Early candidate for game of the year. We'll see. I mean, it's some really good Big Ten games to still happen.
Yep.
First of which happening this upcoming weekend, but nonetheless, I'll go to my Fallen of the week. USC Notre Dame. Kind of dove into some depth in the first segment of the show, but I mean, just really, really unacceptable from USC, and you would have hoped they would have showed up. I think for me, it is more of a LS or what am I saying? More of a USC kind of lost the game more than Notre Dame kind of won it in my book. But
See, I'll disagree with you there. I felt like USC showed up. I felt like this is the USC team we've watched all season. They just haven't played a team this good. We
yeah,
watched them really struggle with Arizona, go to multiple overtimes there.
yeah,
We watched them really struggle with Colorado, who is probably not nearly as good as we thought they were. It's been even I can't recall who they played week one, but it was the same thing. They won with ease against the worst team, but the other team was able to score with ease as well because that defense just hasn't been real. And yeah, I mean obviously Caleb Williams doesn't throw 3 interceptions ever, so that's where you could say this is on USC. They did it to themselves, but
hmm
I thought overall this is pretty much the USC team we've seen, with the exception of Caleb, didn't quite look as good as he normally does.
Yeah, I mean, fair notes. You call it as you've seen it in every week leading up to the game, and it's not, yeah, not really surprising, you know, given, I guess, some of the games. I mean, I should have been as oblivious looking back, but yeah, I mean, good win from Notre Dame, and they're an interesting team to see where they end up, come season end, if they can maybe crack into that top 10 range again. But really interesting, again, it just, I think, hits home how interesting this season is across the college landscape, and aren't really complete total juggernauts, but you just think Notre Dame doesn't really have the path to ultimately get into the CFP necessarily, but still looking like it could be a good season, all in all. But transitioning down to the SEC here, Arkansas versus Bama. You called Arkansas covering, I didn't, and Arkansas made it a very interesting game in that second half.
They showed life for sure. They got off the mat, which even though I said, hey, they've given Alabama some fits recently, this is probably going to be closer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it'd be this close. I didn't think it'd be a game that Arkansas had a chance to win in the fourth quarter.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, just really, really interesting. I mean, Bama now, I mean, they're still, in and around that top 10. Can they really kind of crack that and show that they're one to watch, really, and take control of, these SC West, conference games? We'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's just clearly, not the high powered, fortress type Bama team that we've been used to seeing for so long. And
although I will throw one thing in there, I thought Joe Milroe looked better than he has. I kind of think he's rounding into form, which wouldn't shock me if a Nick Saban coach quarterback got better throughout the season. So I thought that was nice to see for him anyway. Not that I'm rooting for Alabama ever, but yeah, I just thought that was one note that I had on Bama, was that he looked better than he has, I think.
Sure, no, good point. And then going to the ACC, your Miami Hurricane. I was on. You were on the Hurricane side. I was on the UNC side, and in that second half, UNC. I mean, really, that third quarter, UNC just kind of exploded. And Tez Walker, really honorable mention for Ballin of the Week. I'm really his first full week. Yeah, I mean, he was right up there. If only another guy didn't get 3 touchdowns and 300 yards receiving, but I mean, really, really good game from a UNC offense kind of rolling perspective. But
yeah, this was, I think, legitimately the worst officiated game I've ever seen in my entire life, and I don't say that to be like, oh, Miami should have won.
Okay.
I do think the officials were like a 24-point swing in the first half alone.
Okay.
UNC scored all 14 of their first half points on drives that they had been stopped and were punting, and then like flags from the rafters going, wait, look at targeting from that last play that's already been over and no flag was thrown. And then Miami, same thing, had 10 points essentially wiped off the board by the officials. But then in the second half, not only did UNC explode, UNC exploded with the restrictor plate on because the refs were flagging them every chance they got. I don't think there was any type of fix or any. I think this crew just loves throwing the flag, and they threw so many that at one point the announcers actually said, I think these guys are going to get tennis elbow from throwing so many flags. It was insane. It was almost after every single play you saw yellow hanky on the field.
Yeah,
but
wild.
Yeah, but no, you called it. It was It was all the third quarter. UNC came out of the locker room with their hair on fire and looked like the best offense that we've seen out of UNC this year by far.
Oh yeah, and especially obviously Drake May at the helm. And my preseason, my Drake May Heisman prop still alive and fighting. Although it's now latest market, it's in the range of, I mean, Penix is in the minus 100-ish territory, which obviously, I mean, it's very much trending in that direction. But if Washington slips up, and maybe Penix, even if Penix maybe doesn't, if Washington loses or Penix has uncharacteristic game, or two, it's still open for I think a couple guys.
I will say, Penix was great. Obviously, he's always great. that game didn't reek of Heisman moment to me.
Not necessarily.
I mean,
I see what you're
big
saying.
win is usually, that's you stamp your Heisman moment, but I didn't think that he was, far and away the best player on the field. Which he's incredible. He's, my pick for Heisman right now, obviously. But he didn't get the ball at the end of the game with a chance to go down and win it. Usually that's like the thing that leads off a guy's Heisman campaign.
I guess because of he kind of was zone worst enemy with how quickly 2 plays.
He got it down so quick. He didn't have one of those drives that
to your point, which it only furthers the point. Man, it would have been cool to see something.
It would have been.
And then, see what individual moments that could have produced from the quarterbacks, both of them. But, good game for a good showing from UNC.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely, especially with Tez Walker back there, a team to watch 100%. And then staying within that ACC, we touched on it. Louisville was one of my Fallins. Pitt just showed up, and it was as simple as that. At home, Pitt made it really difficult for Louisville, and Louisville just didn't really have it.
No, and this was, it was a weird game because Louisville's defense has been so good, and Pitt scored pretty much at will, which you'd think that defense would travel. Defense would kind of be the thing that if you're going to come out flat, it's going to be your offense that comes out flat. But no, it seemed to be the other way. But it was, like you said, we kind of both called it going into this game. This is a classic letdown spot, and it's Pitt's spot to come up and insert themselves into the conversation, because they're not going to do it with their record or with their bowl if they even become bowl eligible. So
and to that point, we gotta, when we're both on the same page with some of these larger lines with some of these teams, we gotta do, if only looking back, I just wish some more money line sprinkles on, the first week we covered with week 6 with Wyoming, and then now just recently with Pitt. It's like we've been able to identify some upsets again for both when Fresno State and Louisville ranked teams at the time. So a little bit of it makes you incentivize you to watch this show even further. But going down to,
just don't take our best bets.
Well,
we'll get into that.
Or you got to pick a side for best bets. We'll say that. But UCLA, Oregon State. UCLA, was my 5th potential bounce back team we talked about in our last show. More in that offense, some struggles against a very good Oregon State team. And you called, you're on the right side of this with Oregon State, and you had said, why UCLA wasn't one of your bounce back teams because of this game. And Oregon State, really formidable, pretty complete team. And man, it just makes you think, and it kind of puzzles you a little bit, but not as much because of how deep and how strong in all areas the Pac-12 as a conference is. But man, if Oregon State hadn't lost to Washington State, they're really kind of right up there in that top 10 fringe conversation with the likes of Oregon and Washington.
I got a little bit of a take here.
Okay.
There's a chance that the Pac-12 is the best conference in all of football, and we don't see them represented in the college football playoff. Because there are so many teams in this conference, like you mentioned. Washington State can beat Oregon State. Arizona can go toe-to-toe with USC, and of course, you have the top dogs, and you have Colorado could still knock somebody off, and you got Utah is still a good team, and UCLA, even though they lost this game, is still a very good team. You go, there's a very realistic scenario where everyone gets out of the Pac-12 with 2 losses, and then they're
just
ineligible,
carnage.
Basically.
Carnage, which would honestly be, that would track to be extremely ironic after the end of the conference, right? The best year, though, they've basically had ever from a strength across the board, but then they ultimately fall flat and they don't get into the playoff.
They fall victim to their own strength, essentially.
Which is crazy considering, in the past it's been,
there are no good Pac-12 teams to put in this year.
And everybody else in, the Big Ten SEC looks so better in comparison from a strength of conference perspective. But staying in the Pac-12, another one we were kind of toe to toe with what we thought would happen. Cal against Utah. Cal did lead after a quarter, stayed into that. It was for a little bit in that first half. It was tracking as my I liked, because it was 11 points. I liked Cal to maybe lose by like 10.
Yeah.
And it was tracking like that for a little bit, but then Utah just pulled away at the in that second half.
Yeah, and what I'll say about Cal is they had more offense than they had points on the board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seemed like they were driving
Yeah.
more often than not. Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty much what I said, and that's why I had Utah on my potential bounce back teams. Yeah, I think they can do this a few more times and against a few better teams, and we could be looking up in a few weeks going, why'd we forget about Utah?
Yeah, well, you didn't really. I mean, I'm the one that's relatively on the show, kind of forgotten about them. But yeah, they've just kind of been flowing under the radar, kind of in that limbo of that kind of 14 to 19, 20 range for basically forever this season. But yeah, Utah is looking pretty good. One of those teams that very well could basically ruin a Oregon-Washington chances of getting into the playoff. Yeah. But ACC, we saw this pretty relatively clearly as well. Duke handling NC State after what seemed like a trap game potentially for Duke, but Duke showed out, and really NC State, a little bit disappointing of a season with the expectations you had at the quarterback position, just not great.
Yeah, it's never great when you make a quarterback change based on talent and not injury. But yeah, it's just to keep it to this game and not go too zoomed out on NC State, because I don't think that's the best direction for the show to.
Yeah, no, just a little overall commentary.
Yeah, oh no, certainly. But I was gonna dig into it, and then I thought, you know what, no one wants to hear that.
No, yeah, it's North Carolina.
Yeah,
the state of North Carolina. It is what it is. Duke though, trending upwards.
Yeah, and Duke was a team. I don't know if we both had them. I certainly did on the bounce back teams. Yep. Because I mean, one tough loss doesn't have to define your whole season. Duke's so well coached that you don't see that.
Yep.
You don't see them falling victim to that. And clearly they didn't here. They didn't come out flat in what was a potential letdown spot. So I'm still pretty high on Duke.
Yep, a lot of reason to be. And then one of my best bets in the SEC, Tennessee at home at Neyland, did hit, covering against A&M, and really it was just came down to a special teams play, a punt return touchdown, which kind of made the difference in the game. And
I think we were spot on at saying, like, these teams might be as good as each other, but just the spot, the week,
home field.
Yeah, everything was kind of in Tennessee's favor, but then you watch the game and it was very easy to watch that and go, these teams are just as good as each other. It's on the margins,
Yep, exactly. And yeah, just like you said, on the margins, and it's really tough to sweat out if you're betting it.
Yes.
But
and this, I will say, I had a few weeks ago, I called the Sam Pittman hot seat game, which I'm sure in Arkansas the seat's getting pretty hot. Haven't seen a ton of it nationally in the media, though. Mm-hmm. This seems to certainly be the Jimbo Fisher hot seat game. I've seen a lot of angry Aggie fans saying, we've had this dude for how long now? And this is every season. Gets ranked early, gets us all excited, gets the hype up, and then can't win a big game ever.
Yeah. I mean, it honestly is hard for me to even remember how long now he's been at A&M.
I think this is year 7.
No way. It can't be that long. I want to say at most year 5. I almost want to say year 4 potentially, but I think he might have gone to A&M at 16. It's 23 right now. Wow. I mean, I guess it's just, regardless how long it's been, it's just to your point, it's kind of
think about how long he hasn't been at Florida State.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
year
it's
4 of Norvell, and there was 2 years before that, so this is year 6.
Okay,
Jimbo's been at A&M for 6 years, and this is every single year.
Wow, yeah. It's just kind of all blends together with this season after season, which I guess, he's definitely... I mean, because it's been even dating back to, I guess, a couple years now. It's, the whole point being the buyout's so impossible, or what are they going to do?
Well, you give him... I mean, you've seen this in the NFL too with the John Gruden
Hmm.
situation where they had to fire him with cause, otherwise it was 10 years, 100 million. And Mel Tucker now they're trying to fire him with cause, same thing because he got that super. It's not just the total value, but it's the amount of years that you're still paying a coach that doesn't work for your team.
Yeah.
It's really tough, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is some type of market correction for coaching contracts coming up. Not that guys will get less money, but maybe just more condensed.
Less
Because,
term on that, yeah.
yeah,
Maybe they do say, "Hey, we'll give you maybe a million, $1.5 million, $2 million more annually. We just don't want to be on the sheer hook for
oh
however
yeah,
long." I could see
oh
that, yeah.
yeah. It was what 90 million for how long with Mel Tucker?
Too long for a
Yeah,
Michigan State head
but I'm
coach.
sure they'd rather, in retrospect, go, we'll give you the 90 million in 4 years rather than over 9 years or
Yeah,
whatever, and then because
just eat into yeah. He
yeah,
just want to get that off the
regardless of the whole
books.
situation, he'd be on the hot seat right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Pac-12 again out west. Cover them really in depth. First segment, Arizona, impressive showing against a Washington State team that is just on a bit of a downward spiral. Unfortunately, after such a good start to the season,
Yeah.
yeah, just disappointing from Cam Ward, that offense. A Jake Dickert coached defense. I mean, just a disappointing showing.
Yeah, and I think it was more than a disappointing showing. This was a head scratcher, man.
Yeah, yeah.
For it to be that big of a beatdown, you wonder what's going on up in Pullman because it doesn't feel normal, right?
No, just really odd. Yeah, really odd and puzzling. But yeah, enough said there.
Hmm.
SEC. Don't say they're back yet, but my LSU Tigers, man. I was on the right side. We went head to head for that. You saw maybe Auburn showing up as kind of their potential,
Yep,
marquee game to show up, but
they did
LSU
not.
and their LSU defense only gave up 18 points. And Jaden Daniels, speaking of Heisman conversation, I mean, it's just tough with how, the early
Yeah.
losses. And look, he put up 50 some points against Ole Miss.
I
And
think with all the great quarterbacks at all the different programs in the country this year, we're not going to see a two-loss guy with win the Heisman. But
no,
I could be wrong.
no, I think he could potentially sneak into, I think, top five conversation for as far as how the votes spin out, because there's something to be said too about just the demographics of the voter base
Hmm.
and maybe some inherent biases.
Are you saying that you have a vote?
I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get there, but yeah, no, just really good again from the LSU offense. Enough said there.
Yeah.
Your best bet, one of your best bets, Kansas, just couldn't really separate. It looked like maybe at times they were.
They did separate, and then they couldn't close it out. They gave
Yeah.
up 15 unanswered. It was yeah, it was a tough watch.
Hmm.
Being my best bet, and it was scary early. Looked like two good teams going at it, and then Kansas pulled away, and it looked like okay, they're showing why there's a difference here, and they're just gonna keep pulling away. They'll probably win by 30. And then the game script totally flipped, and Oklahoma State was the hot team, and Kansas couldn't move the ball, and it hurt as a best bet.
Yep, for sure. But rounding out the 25 here, Missouri, we were on the right side of that
We were.
against Kentucky. Kentucky, another program trending in the very wrong direction.
Yeah, definitely could be on your fallen list going from
Yep, I just didn't want to be too redundant after they just were.
yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to get some uniqueness with that and some diversity there and those with that recognition. But yeah, no, they very easily a fallen. I mean, that's the reality with this program. And you called as much pretty hot 5-0 start, but schedule gets real on this back half.
Yeah, it's been the recent history of Kentucky football. Start undefeated or 4-1 or something, get yourself ranked, get all the hype, get smacked by a big dog, and then you come down to earth and you play Kentucky football, and you maybe finish the
Yeah.
season 7-5, 8-4, and you feel like, oh, maybe we're building something. We don't usually have a winning record. We don't usually go to bowl games. This is cool. And you come back next year just to do it all again.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. Just a cycle there. And speaking of, I guess, cycles, some other, just quickly touching on some other games, notable games we touched on in the preview. Cycles of Big Ten offense or lack thereof with a 15-6 Iowa win over Wisconsin. Really wanted to see more from that Wisconsin offense, I think. And
Yeah. And it's easy to say. I mean, Tanner Mordecai got hurt in that game,
Yeah.
and they went to the backup, whose name I can't recall. But they didn't move the ball at all when Mordecai was in the game, so it wasn't yeah. I mean, probably the big takeaway was Iowa's defense looks real. It was tough for Wisconsin to run the ball, which it's not usually tough for them to do that, as we talked about going into the game. And they looked really good on the back end too. There weren't a lot of open receivers. It wasn't necessarily like either of the Wisconsin quarterbacks were playing poorly. They didn't have a lot of windows to fit balls into. And then on the other end, man, Iowa's offense is really bad.
They were able to run the ball, but
Yeah.
I think the quarterback was 6 for 14, like 80 yards.
Yeah.
Just as
No,
Ferentz wants to.
And I know they've got two real weapons at tight end injured right now, and obviously the way they run their offense, tight end weapons are the most important weapons.
Yeah, no, they are.
But it will be very funny if Brian Ferentz wins the Big Ten this year and doesn't hit the point total he needs to keep his job. He's not averaging 25 a game. In fact, I think he's fairly well below that mark at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he has to be at this point. I mean, just.
But he's on the right side of the Big Ten, and they're in the position to be playing in the Big Ten championship game.
Yep. But yeah, just quick mention there with you talk about their secondary on defense there.
Mm-hmm.
As an NFL draft guy, Cooper DeJean, representing the white cornerback that's gone. It's almost like a unicorn in today's day and age, but really a bona fide stud, first round pick in the NFL draft. I mean, he is really showing out for that defense. But yep, there's that. Going into the other two games here quickly that we touched on. Again, mentioned them earlier. Wyoming. We couldn't bet against the darling of the show. They were up for a good part of the game. It was kind of back and forth, a little bit of a seesaw game against Air Force, who obviously showed why they're a good team. They ended up winning by 7, but Wyoming covered.
Yes, we were kind of right on with our analysis there, but I'd like to give a little extra shout out to myself. I said we'd see Air Force ranked this year. It already happened. They're ranked now. They're 22 in the country. So
Yep, deservedly so.
But yeah, that offense, I hope everyone got a chance to watch it after I said how great it was, because it's just fun, man. It's kind of like watching Washington's offense. It's just fun to watch.
Oh, yeah, totally. And then just to round out the games here, I mean, a team that doesn't deserve to be front and center, hence I've turned now their jersey backwards. I mean, my Gamecocks here, I mean, what more do you want the offense to really do? Like a top 10, 15 passing offense, Spencer Rattler just playing out of this world week in, week out, doesn't miss a throw for basically the first half going into the third quarter. And you have literally the worst passing defense in the country. I mean, it's just a stark, harsh reality from what we've seen with, obviously dating back a while back with, Stephon Gilmore, but even recently, J.C. Horn, Cam Smith ain't walking through that door. It has just been struggle after struggle, week in, week out. I mean, you deserve to lose if you're allowing Graham Mertz to have a career day, put up 41 on you at home. But, yeah, enough said there.
It was a tough watch. I do just have one question for you.
Okay.
Give me a general temperature on Shane Beamer's seat.
It's more the defensive coordinator at this point. He's not. Beamer's a special teams guy, so he kind of he's a special teams CEO type, obviously, so he kind of can operate in the middle here and maybe absolved of some guilt or responsibility that you can maybe throw on that defense. I mean, if anything, he's literally called out. I mean, he's called out the defense in halftime interviews.
Yeah.
And so it's like, as fans, I can respect the urgency or at least the continued attempt to try to just try to rally the guys there. But for me, it's more, I guess, a Clayton White defensively. That's just got to be blown up. Offensively, special teams continue to be good.
Yeah.
But it's just defensively, which Beamer, I can't fault him. He's not really a true defensive guy.
Yeah. No, I like Shane Beamer. But I did start to see some rumblings on Twitter, some South Carolina fans saying, taking some of those clips from pressers and going, man, this guy loves to shirk any responsibility and be like, I'm not the reason we lose. Which is not always a good look.
No, I mean, I guess I can sort of see that, but at the end of the day, I mean...
And you're one of those suckers who believes him. That's what the problem is.
It's just... I don't think he is the issue. I just simply don't. I think if there was literally almost any different combination of factors for that defense, things would just be different. I mean, just not good enough. I mean, he can't go on that field and defend. I don't know what, and he's not calling the defensive plays. So,
well, you know what he can do? He can recruit dudes, because it doesn't look like you guys have dudes on that defense.
Well, not quite. I mean, one of the best recruits all time we got. I mean, one of the big notable things with Jordan Birch, 5-star in-state defensive lineman, transfers. Now he's heading up Oregon's defense. So that was really a hurting and a sore spot, a tough loss, which kind of was a bit of an omen.
Yeah.
Pros to come from that defense. And I mean, you lose Cam Smith, you lose Darius Rush. You lose Zach Pickens to the draft. I mean, there just needs to be so much turnover and overhaul. But look, like you just kind of hinted at, he can recruit and a good offense and really good special teams time and time again, year after year here.
Yep.
It's the defense in my book. And I'm not ready to just any rumblings of Beamer out. I know some actually buddies of mine were quick. This, I guess, isn't even really Beamer related, but wishing, if only we got, looking back, hindsight's hindsight. If only Brent Venables, as, dating back a couple of years ago. But, I mean...
Yeah, I don't think a lot of head coaches are picking South Carolina over Oklahoma. So, I don't know.
No, but just the timing, if we had offered, I guess, been an early arriver. And being that he was in South Carolina, maybe not that idea of not uprooting.
I think he was pretty openly turning down jobs when he was the DC at Clemson.
He could have got his pick.
You may have offered him, and he may have behind the scenes said,
could have been,
I'm fine.
Yeah.
But there you have it, folks. We didn't give you in-depth NC State talk, so we decided to hit you with a little in-depth South Carolina talk.
Where it hurts. I mean, you had your, Miami struggle last week. I just had to get things off my chest with the South Carolina defensive performance and tough loss. But yeah, so best bet recap. We've kind of hinted at it throughout, in the build up to the show here, but Connor, you kind of called it for yourself. 0-3 on the best bets after I went 0-4 the week before.
I did call that. I didn't believe it. I was joking, but I did say I'm going to go 0-3 this week. Yeah, it was brutal. We talked about the Kansas game was brutal. We talked about the Miami game, another one that probably could have gone the other way, but then I don't even remember. Oh, my Hawaii game.
Tough.
Yeah, so that was it was a real tough week, but where'd you go?
So we kind of just flip flopped week to week.
I'm
2-1.
2-1, yeah.
2-1. So we're both equally now through 2 weeks. We're both 2-4.
Yep.
Through 6 picks here. My one that didn't hit was USC. It was funny because obviously Tennessee was a little bit of a battle to the end there. Covered the 3 with a touchdown win, but Oregon, Washington, it was a little bit. I mean, some doubt toward the end. If Oregon had converted that 4th down, it would have been pretty much over that 67. It was some really tough looking back. It was almost 2 failed 4th and goals from inside the 3, both by Oregon to end the first half, and then Washington that previous drive. Yeah. It could have gone horribly, but in the end, points were just going to happen. There was going to be, at least another 6 that happened. Ended up, I was pretty close with saying I think the winning team was going to have to get to around 38, which if it goes 36-36 to overtime, who knows? I mean, I don't think a team would have won on a field goal on the first overtime to get to 39-36, but yeah, still a win. 2-1, 0-3. We're both 2-4. I'm 2-0 in gut-offs. We'll see what the gut-off game is on Friday this week. But yeah, that pretty much does it for this week 7 recap. Con, anything else you have to say?
Yep. I think the path to making money while watching this podcast is clear. Take every bet that we don't make our best bets and then fade the hell out of our best bets. But
yeah, that's not bad. Not bad. Or if you want to just be really spicy, just pick one side.
Yeah,
pick one side.
That's true. You'd go 2 and 3 if you went me and then Colin.
Yep. But yeah, I guess that'll do it.
All right. He's Kirk Herbstreit. I'm Lee Corso, and that's the episode.